Hi everyone. I don't usually do presentations, but when Oscar invited me, I thought that I'd take this opportunity and share with you what we learned so far in our journey in life about what it means to change the world. But before I start, I just wanted to know that how many of you are actually, thinking about maybe someday working to improve the world? Just raise your hand. That's great. So, and for those of you that are thinking maybe, and maybe later on in life you will understand, I think still some of the things that I will mention here today could be relevant, right? Especially for those of you who are trying to change the world, trying to improve the world. And when we think about improving the world, oftentimes to me, just if the new person comes to your class and you give them extra care and support, that's already doing a lot in terms of making sure that that person feels comfortable in your class. Or it could be that in our case we're trying to make sure that every child who is born around this world, they can have access to the same basic healthcare services as we get for granted, for instance, in Sweden. And in Sweden, not so long ago, there were also quite a lot of challenges in terms of, providing healthcare to people. And we still have many issues in Sweden to provide effective healthcare to all the citizens. But we, in some ways in Sweden, people try to tackle this challenge, try to solve this challenge, right? And gradually, step by step, it came this far. Right? And a lot of the problems that have existed 100 years ago, they have been solved. And what we're trying to do is to do the same thing in other parts of the world. For instance, in countries in Uganda or Afghanistan or some other countries in the world where we know that those challenges that Sweden solved are still there. And most of the times when people ask me, okay, how should we go about improving the world? There are a few things that we learned in Shifo throughout this journey that we had, starting from back in the early 2000s when Shifo was not even there, but we tried to do something about these things. And what I came down to understand about this is very similar to the nature of human beings. For instance, for an average Swedish person, if they go to Norway, like to Oslo, how many of you have been to Oslo, Norway? Just raise your hands. Now, if you end up in Oslo, what you see is that everything is almost the same as in Stockholm. Like even the signs in the subways or in the airports are the same. They use the same standards. Yes, they have this strange thing that they eat maybe sandwiches for lunch, right? Which is a little different from Sweden. But other than that, you really have to just make one step and you're in that society. You have kind of integrated into that society. So you don't have to, struggle to become part of that society in Norway, as an example. And the same thing, I guess, for Norwegians, if they come to Sweden, it doesn't take them much time to integrate, to become friends with people and, with the culture, traditions, and language, and so on. But then if you travel, let's say, a bit further, let's say maybe to Uganda, or maybe to Afghanistan, or maybe some other country, you may find that many things are different, right? And in terms of culture, religion, the way people live their lives, what they eat, how they speak, what language they speak, right? And so it takes a lot of time and steps to become integrated into that society. So that's why many people from Sweden, if they travel to Uganda, it takes them a long time to get integrated into that society, to like the food that they like, to eat and to speak the local language, as an example, right? And many of the people, that's why they don't want to learn those languages, new languages, or try different food. They just stick together, right? Because they know that it's easier that way. And we see the same thing in Sweden. When someone from Germany comes to Sweden, it's easier for them to integrate, right? It's just several steps and they're there. But for people who come from Afghanistan or from Tajikistan, where I come from originally, it takes more time to integrate into the Swedish society. So that's why if you give an extra care to those people, I think you're already improving this world. Now, why did I mention this as an example? Because all of us understand these examples. All of us probably have been into some of those situations. And it has everything to do with how we think at Shifo about changing the world. When we decided that we can no longer tolerate that some children in Afghanistan or in Uganda or any other parts of the world dies because of preventable diseases, we decided to do something about this. But we didn't know how to do it. We didn't know what needs to be done. We didn't know what's missing, what are the gaps. So we thought that, okay, what we know from Sweden is how to get reliable data about children so that the system knows if the child is getting preventable healthcare in time or not, and where exactly they have this problem. So we started developing the system based on the experience of Sweden. So for instance, if you go in Sweden to the healthcare center, you oftentimes find that the doctors are sitting in front of the computers and entering information or searching for information, right? And sometimes it takes a lot of time, but anyways, you come across that, right? And we kind of wanted to have the same experience in Uganda or Afghanistan or any other country, right? But then we came to understand that there are a few challenges that did not allow those countries to adopt such solutions because they were expensive to implement and very expensive to maintain. And it's the same example you can relate to of a Swedish person traveling to Afghanistan, that they have to go through many challenges to adopt something, right? To adapt into that culture. So the same way that we couldn't bring the Swedish solution in Uganda or Afghanistan because of some of the limitations. So that's why we learned that one has to actually start by understanding the local context and developing solutions that are not so far away from that context. So that in Uganda, they could take just one step and our solution would be that step, right? So that we can improve by making sure that our solutions are adjusted to the local context. And why did we make this mistake of not maybe thinking from the beginning about that local context? Is because we didn't know what it means to improve the world, what it means to bring changes, what it means to change the systems. And one of the lessons learned that we gained out of this work is that try to learn about the local system and the local context. Because then once you understand what is working and what is not working in that system, then you can try to solve it in such a way that for the people that you're bringing this solution to, they could just make one step and they would be there and you would solve their problems. I can bring this example from another field that we all know about. If any of you have traveled to other countries, maybe Uganda, maybe other countries in the world, you oftentimes find that people have mobile phones in their pockets, right? Before, they didn't have access to the mobile phones. When we had the landline phones, maybe some of you do not know what the landline phones look like or how they work, but usually you had to have cables into your building, into your house, in order to use the phone. And it didn't work in countries like Uganda. That's why in Uganda, they didn't have those opportunities. They didn't access those services. But you see that when mobile phone came, it has expanded dramatically because you didn't need landline connectivity, nothing like that, right? You put the base station and then people have the mobile phone. As long as they charge it somewhere, they're good to go. So that's why, even though it's a high technology solution, but it has been adopted in large scale just because people had to make just one step and they could use that solution. Another example I give you is smartphone. I don't even have to ask you, but most of you probably use smartphone. and you probably already use them for many years now. But not long ago, we've been using the basic phones just for talking and for SMSing to each other. But now we do so many things on them. And to me, smartphone is the great example of an innovation of improving the world that has taken a short period of time. It's probably the most timely and scalable innovation that we have ever seen today. It took roughly 10 years for the world to start moving from one solution to another. And how did that happen in such a short period of time? Because for most of the people who adopted smartphones, it was just one step that they took, and it was there. And they were there using this new solution. You didn't have to have bigger pockets. You didn't have to have a bigger physical space. They utilized almost every existing infrastructure to make that solution work. So again, that solution has gained traction so fast because for people it was just one step, and they were there with that solution. So what I wanted to say with this is that if you want to change the world, try to understand how to bring this world one step towards solving something. Any problem you take, climate change, healthcare, education, doesn't matter what problems. There are lots of problems in this world, and hopefully one day some of you are going to work to solve some of those problems, right? And if you're going to deal with those problems, you have to figure out that your solution should be one step away for people, not 1,000 steps away. Think about those people who come to Sweden, Afghans, maybe some other people from Syria and from all corners of the world. For them, it takes 1,000 steps to integrate into the Swedish society compared to the Norwegians or others that takes just one step. So that's the main reason why some people, they cannot adapt to the Swedish society. The same thing with Swedish people when they travel abroad. So think about this. If you can remember this, it is that the key to solving big problems in this world is to find solutions that when people can take one step and they're there. That's what we have so far learned in Shifo. And you see that maybe it's not going to work for all the problems, and I admit it. But what we believe is that when you take the world one step at a time towards improvement, it's going to work. And why I'm mentioning this to you guys, because when I was at your age, many, many years ago, I was not paying attention to what's happening, to the local context, to what already exists. I was always complaining and trying to revolutionize something, to disrupt something. I was always talking about disruptive solutions, revolutions, and so on. Because we're young, we have a lot of energy, and we want to change the world quickly. We don't have patience. And at this moment, I came to understand that this message is so important for you guys, especially now, because you are going to change the world. I believe in it. Because a lot of Swedish innovations are changing the world, and it's because of these young people like you that this world is going to improve. And I hope that when you are going to step inside and say, okay, I cannot tolerate anymore some problems, and I'm motivated to fix this problem, that you start, first of all, learning about that system and understanding the strengths and the weaknesses of that system. And then when you come up with your solution, you try to understand whether that solution is very close to the existing system, so that that existing system can take just one step to get to your solution. And once you come up with that solution, what you now did is that you found timely and scalable solution. So then, when you found that, right? When you found that solution, your next step should be to try it, right? So that you try at a limited scale and you try to evaluate that solution. Now, when you evaluate, what you need to do is to keep learning about the existing system and adjusting your solution again to make it closer to that system. Make it frictionless for people to move to your solution, not difficult, right? And when you found that, the signals that you get from people, the people will start moving in that direction. When Apple came first with the iPhone, a lot of people were queuing to get that iPhone. Maybe some of you were part of that queue, I don't know. And that's how you know that people are ready to move to your solution. When they pull out the solution from you and they want to use it, that's when you know that you're on the right path. And that's the third step that I was mentioning about in terms of evaluating your solution and understanding whether actually for people it's one step to get to your solution. And once you came to understand that, then you can scale your solution. Then you can work with many different people, and many different people will help you, support you to make sure that your solution is scaled in many different places. This is the experience of Shifo, and I'm sharing with you. And we just named this method that we use DEAR method. Okay, we like deer as an animal because it's very careful. It's not aggressive. It's taking one step at a time. But once it understands where to go, then it runs fast. That's why we like deer. And deer is also the representation of the good things from Sweden and from Scandinavia. So that's why we call it a DEAR method. And it's 4-letter words. And let me again repeat this, what this stands for. The first is about discovering the existing system. That's the first D in the DEAR method. Discover existing system. Be good at existing system. Understand it. Take your time. Once you understood strengths and weaknesses, then you go to E, which is explore solutions that are closest to that existing system. And when you explore that solution, find the one that is the closest to that system that we have now. Because one step, so that your solution is one step away for people. And once you came up with that solution, then you can move to the third step, and that is to evaluate your solution and the potential of that solution. And that's where you need to get those signals. Maybe people queuing up to get your solution, or maybe people are pulling it away from you, they want it, and you can validate your idea, your solution there in the third step. And the last step, and hopefully some of you at some part of your life will come to that step, it's called realize the full potential of that solution. So that's R, the last point, right? In this 4-step model, DEAR method as we call it in Shifo, and realizing the full potential, meaning you're scaling up this solution in many different places. None of the things that I'm mentioning to you is probably new to you guys. Maybe it's all already within you, and that is good. Because again, this method that I'm telling to you, it should be one step for you to use that method, not thousands of steps, right? So as long as you remember that the solution that you develop for this world has to take just one step for people to adapt, the chances of your solution to be successful will be very, very high. And I hope that some of you, if you're interested to learn much more about DEAR method and about Shifo, then reach out to us. We are in Stockholm, Sweden, and we would be glad to tell you more. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's now you can hear me. Thank you so much. Just before we leave, it's difficult in a couple of minutes maybe, but can you say something about what you actually have done and achieved with Shifo in those countries? Just in a minute, because you worked with the child care systems in, for example, Afghanistan and Uganda. So what have you done? 1 minute, Rustam. Yeah, try to.
In many of those countries today, they use a paper-based system to be able to register children, to be able to follow up on children. But unfortunately, most of those are limited at the care setting, and they're not being digitized and available electronically to understand what's happening within the health system. So in order to again think about solution which is sustainable and scalable, we made sure that those paper-based forms, they can be scanner friendly, so that they could be sent for scanning where they are scanned and digitized. And that way we can get the same benefits of the electronic health record systems that exist in Sweden, as an example. So you see that we modified the existing paper forms, which means that the health workers, for them, it was just one step to use our solution, but when they use it, their administrative time has been reduced by more than 70% from what they used to do before. And then, in addition to that, all the information that is necessary to know what's going on about different children in different villages and different parts of the country would be available, so that based on that, different key actors in the government, in the non-government organizations and UN agencies, they would be able to work together to understand where the gaps are and close those gaps. And this is what we have been doing so far, and we started in Uganda and continued our work in Afghanistan to test this method and improve it. And now we're working in other countries in the world, such as Kenya, Tanzania, Gambia, and so on. So that's why I'm happy that we reached this fourth step, right? And that's what we've been doing so far to experiment with this method, which is helping us today in our work at Shifo.
All right. And again, I'm very thankful for having you here, a person who actually, yes, thank you. A person who gives us methods, easy methods to change the world, the DEAR method. That was interesting. An example as well how to change the world in reality. So thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
Now back to your lessons. Yes.
Thank you, Oscar.